Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for participants to join us. We're going to give everyone just a little bit extra time before we start our program. And to those that are just joining, this is Bryce Besser from the Staff Association. We're just letting a few more of you in before we start our programming here, and we'll get started shortly. Just another couple of seconds here to let two more folks in. Well, good morning, UC San Diego staff. Thank you so much. I know some of you are still coming into the room right now and joining us, but in order to make sure that we are respectful of everyone's time, I wanted to make sure that we did start on time. So again, good morning. My name is Bryce Besser, and I am the chair of the UC San Diego Staff Association. And on behalf of the Staff Association and Human Resources, I'd like to welcome you to Cabinet Conversations. So you've probably heard me talk about this before in our first Cabinet Conversation with Pierre Oulet, our CFO, but Cabinet Conversations is really a series of conversations with Cabinet members, and it's designed to provide staff members an opportunity to get to know our campus leaders on a more personal level, but also to get to hear them answer questions about some of the things that are top of mind for our staff these days. It really did come out of your requests in the Staff at Work survey, our CUCSA engagement survey, and the Idea Wave that was part of the Staff Association strategic plan. So this is something that you have asked for and that we are happy to bring to you. Today's webinar features Nancy Resnick, our Chief HR Officer. Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning, Bryce. Good morning, everybody.
And before we begin our program, we do have some housekeeping items here. So for the best viewing of this, you can set up your monitor in a number of different ways, but there are some recommendations in the chat that we have right now. So go ahead and check the chat out and you can set up your monitor. Right now, I am looking at myself and Nancy, kind of like if I was talking to her right now in her living room or wherever it is that she's sitting. So if you would like to experience that like we are, you can set up your monitor that way. We've also taken a number of precautions against Zoom bombing, and so I wanted to mention that. So right now we have participants' videos and audios off. We've also attempted to limit the login only to UC San Diego personnel. But like in our first webinar, so if we do have any interruptions at any type of Zoom bombing, then we're going to go ahead and stop the webinar immediately, and we'll go ahead and find another date and time so that we can resume. This is really just to ensure the integrity of the conversations and also just to protect you all. So we hope that you understand that. Also, we received a number of questions, and we're going to get to as many of them as we can today. If you haven't already submitted questions, then feel free to submit those in the question and answer function. The Q&A function is down at the lower part of your screen. Moderators are monitoring these questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And the Staff Association will also save questions that we weren't able to answer. And then that way we can try to connect with Nancy at a later time so that perhaps she or other executive members can answer your questions. So with that, let's get started. Nancy, thank you so much for joining us today. As part of the Staff Association, I've enjoyed a very close connection with you and HR, and being able to have you here today with the rest of the staff, I hope will show them, how welcoming you and HR have been to the staff experience. And so I really do thank you for your time today.
Oh, well, thank you, Bryce. I'll say one of the interruptions that I can pretty confidently say we won't have is I asked my husband to leave the house. So I tried to be subtle about it, and then I realized I had to be a little more direct and suggested that perhaps he might want to leave, because I am actually in my living room, and I'm kind of thinking of us as sitting together, having a chat. And so in today's world, I think this is a good approximation of that. So I really appreciate the opportunity to support the Staff Association and share information with our staff. And I reflect back a little on our early conversations about this event, looking at, as you mentioned, Bryce, the CUCSA survey and other feedback about seeking to have greater visibility for leadership. So I really want to commend you and congratulate you on making this a reality. And I'm very happy to support it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and certainly I cannot take full credit for this at all. I mean, this is something that the Staff Association has put forward, Luis Gospi, the immediate past chair as well, and the rest of the board members. But I do thank you very much for that. I think it's a great experience, and I know that our staff are eager to meet you and also hear, you know, what you have to say on some of the pressing issues that have been top of mind. So let's just kind of start out with maybe some questions that will help folks know more about you. So can you tell me a little bit about your background, your journey becoming, you know, the CHRO here on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out being a lawyer. I was a lawyer practicing employment law in the Bay Area for a little over 20 years. In my early career, I represented unions, I represented individual employees, I represented public sector employers. I was a trial attorney for the U.S. Department of Labor. And then I was in-house counsel and worked closely with really my human resources clients internally in large organizations. And then we decided to kind of reinvent our lives and move away from the city. And I accepted a position at Humboldt State University in human resources. So I made a transition from practicing law to going into the role of being an HR professional in higher ed. And then after that, I went from there to University of Oregon, where I was the CHRO and Associate Vice President, and then came here to UC San Diego as your CHRO.
So in general, I mean, taking a step out of being a litigator and moving over to an HR role, I mean, there's definitely similarities of experiences that you bring in, right, from the litigator role. But can you just quickly talk about how things might differ from being the litigator and then coming over and working in an HR capacity?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I did as an attorney was I provided advice and counsel and guidance. And then particularly in my in-house counsel role, in many ways, I was sort of behind the scenes helping the HR organization with the decision-making, policies, communication strategies. And so those are very closely connected to the role that I have. I feel like actually each stage in my career trajectory, and this is just kind of fortuitous, I can't take credit for having this overarching strategic vision of my career necessarily, but it has happened to be the case that I think in each position I've learned something and brought something forward that I can now kind of leverage and use in this role that I'm fortunate to hold currently.
Great. And so, you know, right now, I think many of us have experienced a drastic change in our day-to-day, right? We're working and we're living out of the house. But for you personally, I mean, how have you been spending your time outside of work, of course, you know, as you kind of cocoon, as you shelter in place here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been I'm more connected with my neighborhood. I live in Claremont. I've had an opportunity to get to know some neighbors more, which has been really very nice. I've had an opportunity to kind of explore. I've never been a gardener, but I've had kind of this whole experience around succulent plants and the plants here in San Diego, which I find super extraordinary. And so we have a little succulent sharing place just up the street where neighbors put out extra clippings, and I've kind of found myself walking over there and then planting things which then just miraculously grow and you stick them into the ground. So a little bit of exploration of kind of botany. And I also, I love to read. I love to hike or run in the canyons that are right by my house. I'm very, you know, if I have a very short break in meetings, I'll try to just briefly walk outside on the street and get outside. If I have a slightly longer break, I might get on my bicycle and go for a little bike ride in my neighborhood. But I've been kind of, you know, as you say, cocooning and appreciating the the, opportunity and requirement, to be at home.
Yeah, what I find surprising is how much, even though I've been apart from a lot of folks, you know, the day to day, I still am able to connect with people in much different ways. But I'm able to connect with them. But then also, I've actually been able to kind of reconnect with people that maybe I haven't seen in a while or talked to in a while. I guess seen isn't necessarily the right way to describe it, but you know, so you're actually able to kind of reconnect with your neighborhood, with folks. And I've seen a lot more people waving, if I'm actually out, people are actually engaging more, which I think is, from my perspective, a positive. Do you have any
Yeah.
other hobbies?
Other hobbies. So I'm a painter. I'm an artist, and I continue to do artwork even despite, having a kind of a rigorous, set of work demands, I would say. That's just been kind of a constant in my life. And I love to read. I'm kind of a homebody in certain ways, I think, in many ways. So I appreciate being home. I actually do love to travel, but I think we'll have to all sort of hold any of those plans in abeyance for the time being.
Yeah, exactly. I love the idea of travel, the actual travel itself. I like getting to my destination, but the travel to and from has always been problematic for me. So the traveling part isn't necessarily something that I enjoy.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's top of mind for our staff, and something that I hope you can address with us, is how is HR helping to address anti-Blackness and social equity here at UC San Diego?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is just a hugely important topic in our world. Racism, anti-Black racism specifically, I think we are at a time where I hope we are really able to and have the appetite and kind of integrity to look really closely at issues of systemic racism. We have, a history that is in many, many respects deeply shameful around race and around anti-Black racism in particular. Those of us who are not Black have a responsibility as allies and as thinking people in our community to, I think, learn and undertake actions to address racism. So in terms of my role and in human resources, what I've tried to do, and I think with quite a bit of success, is use the opportunity for my own HR organization, which is about 100 people, to really open up an opportunity to discuss issues around race and to share, to the extent people are comfortable in sharing, the real experiences of our Black colleagues, to kind of understand the deep trauma and impacts that are part of the Black experience in our society, and to kind of, so I've had the great good fortune to have, my colleagues and members of my leadership team and others in my organization kind of have the courage to share with the group their own lived experiences around this. And we've tried to offer, and we've offered a number of resources, films, reading, suggestions about how to study and learn about the history of race in this country. And we took some time around Juneteenth to devote some time specifically to kind of further our understanding and insight around these issues. And I think it's a continuing dialogue that is of great importance for all of us. We're also happy to be sponsoring the Black Staff Association, the current, the seminar, or ongoing workshops around transcending racism that I think are incredibly powerful. There are 2 more of those coming, and I look forward to participating. I found, for me, participation in the prior workshop was very powerful, and it was very valuable. And of course, we look to support staff in looking at these issues and support really the people of UC San Diego in other ways, looking at training around implicit bias and looking at a variety of kind of HR practices around ensuring that we do not have historical barriers in place, and ensuring that we are, to the greatest extent we can, working to, bring in talent broadly, to look differently at maybe the ways in which we had previously constructed our discussion around competencies, to think a little bit differently and from a broader perspective, so that we're really informed by and learning from this deeply important topic.
Yeah, I know that, I mean, for me personally, and the conversations that I've had with, other staff association leaders, including leaders from the Black Staff Association, we really do thank you for your support. The fact that, you recognize, and other executive members, cabinet members recognize this is a continuing conversation. It's something that, we are putting resources to and continue to have these conversations, I think is really great. So I want to thank you as well for that. I always kind of see it as, being able to bring people together so that we can have tough conversations, right? We can have tough conversations and come to a resolution, right? And so that's, I think, what this is at the heart of it, is just bringing people together, trying to help them understand, the full scope and extent of things. And then that way we can kind of start charting a path, a plan, right? Something that's actually going to make change. So I thank you for that. So about COVID-19, it's on the top of mind for everybody, of course. And I mean, we all know that it really changed the way that we've worked, right? The way that we've had to work. And so I think a lot of the staff maybe were in attendance last week at the staff town hall. Some of them might not have been. So can you kind of tell us a little bit more about what the future of work at UC San Diego is going to look like?
I can certainly share some aspects of what I see in our future. And I think at the same time, I'll have to say that I need to recognize, and I think we all know this, that there are many uncertainties. Or specifically around COVID-19, there are many uncertainties around how long will the requirements around masking and social distancing and all of these kinds of important protections, how long will those be in place? In terms of what I see sort of in the nearer term for our staff, one thing that I can share with you and with those of you who've been able to join us, and that we will be communicating out formally in the next day or two, is that for staff who are working remotely now successfully, please know that you can continue to work remotely unless if your supervisor tells you differently. Of course, that would be different, but through and at least through December 31st. We've just recognized that it's been very difficult for all of us to make plans, and it's been very apparent for folks in leadership roles that it's of great value to put parameters around some duration to the extent that we can. So we are going to share this out more formally very, very soon. But previously, you'll recall that the prior message was that staff working remotely would continue to do so through the beginning of September at the earliest. So by pushing this timeframe out, my hope is that this will make it easier to make plans around children, around family obligations, just around life, actually, just to sort of have a sense of where we are. I think for all of us, the uncertainty and kind of there's a number of stressors around COVID that are real stressors, and some of those are around how uncertain the future looks. And so to the extent we can put parameters around aspects of the future, I think it's a very positive development, and I'm very happy to be able to share that with you. So this is sort of hot off the press. In fact, it's not even off the press yet. It's I guess a sneak preview of what will be hot off the press that I'm delighted to be able to share today. In other respects, I think as we look at remote work, my sense is that we're highly effective in many ways working remotely, in ways that we would not have envisioned prior to March. So my eyes are kind of opened in terms of the way technology affords us new ways to work and the way that we can really look to reimagining the workplace, even post-COVID, in a way that is going to bring us to a place of greater flexibility and use technology in ways that will still foster connection and that will ensure accountability, that will help us with our sustainability principles, and that just will make, I think, the experience of work at UC San Diego more rewarding and more engaging, and open up some possibilities of greater work-life balance. I think there is a definite silver lining here, although there are many challenges. And I just want to also say, because it's important to note, Bryce, too, we have many staff who are not working remotely, who've been here on campus. They have made campus operations work. We owe them a debt of gratitude in terms of being there, literally being on the ground and keeping our campus open and keeping our campus operational. And I think while those jobs may not lend themselves to remote work, there may be ways in which there's greater flexibility in the workplace of an on-campus kind of position as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I think it's great that we have some new guidance on kind of a pushing out of, you know, a return to campus, a large return to campus presence. I think that's important. The conversation that I've had with staff, you know, they are wondering a lot about when am I going to get called back in? If I'm going to get called back in, how's that going to work? And so I really appreciate you being willing to share that information with us today. I think it's very important for staff to hear these things, even if it's not the entire picture. It's, you know, it's information that's updated on a continual basis, I think, that kind of helps us out. So I really appreciate that. You know, one of the other things that I wanted to just kind of point out, I mean, again, Susan, everybody on this Zoom has the opportunity to kind of engage in the conversations that you and I have been engaged in. And really just to kind of point out that, I mean, I think it's great that the different groups that are working on the return to campus issues, you know, are looking at it from multifaceted lenses, right? I mean, they're looking at it from every different direction. And so what you said about the folks that have been on campus from day one, you know, taking their health, safety, and considerations, you know, and keeping that in mind is something that, you know, I think staff would like to know, and that's being done. And then also, you know, we're looking at the angles from, you know, different staff members, right? Different folks, like the exempt folks, and also the frontline staff and student-facing staff versus non-student facing. So there's all of these things at play. And I think that staff, you know, and from my perspective, those that are joining us today, hopefully they understand that all of these things are being taken into consideration right now.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that's really true. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I do think we have a remarkably complex operation. If you think of UC San Diego, sometimes people describe it as being a small city or not even really that small. It's highly complicated. People work in all kinds of ways to support the institution. And so there are a wide variety of kind of workplace issues that may be to some extent shared, but to some extent unique to that person. And we try to recognize all these different situations and looking at ways to build flexibility and ways to build, I think really to me, a culture in which employees are heard, employees are supported, that this is a satisfying place to work, where there's opportunities for career advancement, where there is visibility in terms of leadership, you know, where there's a connection where we feel as employees that our work matters and that our work supports the work of the institution, which is really, you know, it's fantastic work. If I think back, you know, back to your earlier question about where did I work previously, I mean, one of the things about working in higher ed and working for the University of California is we are the most impactful public higher ed institution in the world. We are truly making a difference in the world. The work that we do in our work with our students, our research is really changing the future of the world to make it better. So I think generating a sense of connectedness with that is a very important goal, and one that is important to me as we think about kind of fostering a culture of greater inclusivity and kind of greater engagement.
So can you kind of expand on that a little bit? I mean, in essence, what's your vision for HR at UC San Diego? I mean, it might have been something before COVID, but I mean, what's your vision now when it comes to how HR at UC San Diego is going to be?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I would actually look to see, and this may or may not be exactly what you've asked, but what is the role that HR plays in influencing people and culture at UC San Diego? Is I think the question that is really top of mind for me. And as I think about my role as a Chief Human Resources Officer, I see it as an incredible opportunity and responsibility. So I really think HR fundamentally supports the people of our institution in all kinds of ways through kind of the employee life cycle, but also through the experience of being an employee. Then that would include aspects of career trajectory and promotions, aspects of training and discussions between managers and employees, or supervisors and the employees that they supervise, and including opportunities for employees to be connected as part of a community. So HR is to me an organization which has many, at its core, it has a series of important transactional functions, to help get people hired, to help get people sort of situated in the workplace. But what's more important than that, and it builds upon that, as that's the foundational piece, is really how do those kinds of core operational decisions, how are they informed by principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion? How are they informed by a broader thinking about how to bring in and retain and attract and retain talent? How do we ensure that there's a workplace where employees are heard? How can we foster a culture that is what I like to say is kind and courageous, where we support each other, we see each other as whole people, and we can have honest conversations that are predicated on kind of a place of trust, a place of assuming positive intent, but we can ask hard questions and try to make things better because we share a commitment to the institution. And so I look at different ways that my organization is part of and influences that movement forward to shifting our culture, to building on what is a very, very strong foundation, but to make it even stronger.
So we've had some pretty specific questions that staff members have, put in before the webinar. And so I wanted to make sure that we touched on those. And I think now is probably a good time to kind of tie those in. As you're talking about, how your vision for HR and the support that HR can provide to staff and managers during these uncertain times. So they're kind of related, so I can just kind of maybe ask them together. So do you have any advice on, do you have any advice for staff who, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it, I mean, they're having some challenging conversations with supervisors about kind of balancing work and childcare, issues of distance learning. So is there any advice to those staff members who are kind of experiencing these issues?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is we will always be happy in HR to provide individual, kind of tailored discussions and advice. In general, I mean, the question you raise is a really important one around childcare and around just sort of life issues. I think at its heart, what you might really be asking me is how can we have a culture where there's a comfort level in raising issues, that they will be heard, where staff feel unafraid to bring forward issues that are important. And I don't think we fully achieved that culture from the feedback that I hear. So I think there's a number of approaches to take there. One is that we are constantly providing guidance specifically and generally to managers and supervisors and encouraging open conversations. And we try to explicitly say where possible, this is support your employee to do activities such as tuning into this call. That this is valuable. It's part of building the community of UC San Diego. attending the Transcending Racism workshops. That is valuable. That is a valuable way for employees to spend their time. I think conversations around family responsibilities and children are very relevant right now. One of the new developments that I want to share, and we'll be also putting information out, comes from a system-wide Office of the President determination that allows sick leave to be used more expansively. So sick leave can now be used for situations where an employee can't work because they have a child care related responsibility at home. That might be a child care or school situation. So sick leave is appropriate to use. In this case, it could well be that the employee is not sick and the child is not sick. So if it is a more expansive way to use sick leave, and we'll be putting out information about that so employees know and their supervisors know that there's this additional protection afforded employees. We're also looking at additional COVID-19 related leave protection through our chancellor, and we will have more information forthcoming about that very soon as well. So I think there are actual protections that are important to know about, and then there's the culture that I think goes to your question, Bryce, which is how do we ensure that there's a culture where these protections are utilized and employees and their supervisors understand that that is entirely fine. That's why they're there. And, how do we have an open conversation about that? So we are looking at a number of things. When we put out information about performance evaluations, we are going to very intentionally have guidance and resources around opening up the dialogue so that we try to train our supervisors and managers. I would encourage employees to also feel empowered to initiate those conversations, but I know that not everyone does so. And so I continue to look for ways that we can kind of foster that, that culture of having an open conversation in a way that is supportive and in a way that is genuine, and that can help to kind of get greater clarity on everybody's part. So I also would welcome suggestions for those who are on this call or from the staff association about how we can continue to sort of share that it's a skill set in a certain way, and it's an expectation maybe in a certain way too, around how we want to we want to engage with each other.
Yeah, there was a question that had actually come in through the question and answer. I think that you have touched on it, but I did want to make sure that we kind of followed up just in case there was something that you wanted to add. But the question reads, so managers within the chain of command may have varying degrees of enlightenment when it comes to the concept of remote work. And so the question is, how does someone ensure a level of consistency and fairness in this regard?
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question. I think some of the aspects that we're looking at in terms of reimagining the workplace are actually explicitly around overcoming cultural resistance, or to put it differently, maybe to demonstrate the success of remote work, or demonstrate that in this forced experiment that many of us have been engaged in, we've actually had remarkable success. Beyond what many of us would ever have anticipated. So how do we share that learning? One of the things the Administrative Continuity Task Force, which is part of the greater Return to Learn, but focusing on returning to the workplace, that body of work is focused on identifying shared institutional principles around, really predicated on, if people are working remotely successfully, then what would be the need to bring them back? So it's sort of flipping the equation from what it was previously, which would have been to say, what's your justification for seeking to telework or seeking to remote work? And so I think there is, again, the more we socialize the site idea and talk through and really understand, what is working well about the current arrangement, the more helpful that will be. I The other thing is we're fundamentally doing this to support our students and to support return to learn by de-densifying campus. So in this nearer term, we're very much hoping and expecting to welcome our students back, and we want to ensure the safety and success of our students, and partly we can help support that success by de-densifying campus. And so that means actually keep people working remotely who are doing so successfully. I also think if there are particular situations that are troubling or problematic, I just want to reiterate that human resources is in fact a resource to turn to. And we can look at individual situations and see how we can be of assistance.
Yeah, Nancy, it's kind of the way that the way that these groups are shifting kind of the lens, right, from justifying why you should be remote to now kind of looking at it in terms of more justification of why you need to be back on campus. That's a subtle shift, but also I think a very powerful one. And so I think, at least I would hope that the staff and the individuals that are participating in this webinar today would kind of think about that a little bit more, about how that shift, can be very powerful. And so for the staff members that are wondering, will I be asked to come back? The way that it's been laid out is that the VC units and departments are going to be looking very carefully at the justifications for coming back to campus, right? What's the need to come back on campus? And so it's not just something that's going to be one day a switch goes off and everybody's back. It's going to be something that's very intentional by design.
Yeah, exactly. And it really is a paradigm shift. I agree with you.
Yeah, so one of the other questions that came in, and again, you've touched on it a little bit, but I want to make sure that we kind of address it directly, is so working parents, will they have the opportunity to continue to telecommute when schools and daycares are closed?
Well, so for sure, again, for those who are working remotely now, we know that the expectation is that unless the person hears differently from their supervisor, but that the remote work arrangement would continue at the very least through December 31st. So I'm hoping that gives some relief in terms of, the fall K-12 schedule for parents. This issue around caring for kids at home, whether they're small children or older, children K-12, it's a very big issue for many of our staff. And I do want to say there are other very meaningful and important family and caregiver issues that may be with elder parents or other issues that are also extremely impactful. So I don't want to neglect other situations that are very important as well. And at the same time, this shift to online K-12 is very challenging. So I think it's going to be important for us to be looking at enhanced flexibility. How do we look at the potential of maybe having for example, if it would work well operationally and for the employee, but some kind of a split in the work day. So there's a kind of an early morning segment of the work day, and then a chunk of time that someone could be not working and interacting with their child, and then resuming work later, or just a lot of different options that we want to explore. And we are actively looking at in what way can HR kind of put forward almost like a little toolkit or a list of options to consider, and that we delineate what those are. We have flexible work options, and I think we want to be more clear about what they are, when would they be appropriate, how could someone enter into those kinds of arrangements, and kind of how to evaluate it and what might be available. And then there are other, I would say they're in a kind of nascent stage, but other creative ideas that people are looking at in terms of other forms of support and resources around this issue.
Yeah, I'm just checking some of the questions and answers to see if there are some that we can kind of mix in. One that came in was, I think, kind of touching on how, working remotely has its unique challenges and also brings with it maybe some unique situations when it comes to performance management, right? Employee goals and that sort of thing. So you touched on it, I believe, earlier, but in a little bit of the time that we have left, and we're kind of coming to the end, but maybe you can touch on a little bit about some of the resources that HR has been rolling out when it comes to assisting with managers and supervisors and staff for that matter, to kind of understand in the virtual work environment expectations and performance management.
Yeah, we've had a series of a kind of an open consultation forum for managers and supervisors, and we're also rolling out. We will be rolling out in August a series of workshops and trainings around managing in a remote work environment. And I do think in some ways the difference in managing in a remote work environment compared to an actual physical environment may not be as great as we sometimes think at the outset. You know, to me, the management of an employee, you know, is predicated on connection with what the employee is doing, support for the employee's goals, understanding where the employee may need additional training or resources, celebrating accomplishments, having an insurance that there's a community and connection within the workplace, and that there's a kind of a avoidance of silos by an intentional sharing and maybe cross collaboration within the unit. And those things actually exist just as much in a world of Zoom as they do in a world of physical workspace on campus. So I think some of it is just using our tools differently and thinking differently about how to have an engaged workplace. And we will continue to offer and have been offering very robust advice, training, and we'll continue to do that. And as I say, we'll have information launching our new series that will start in August, and we'll continue as well to welcome questions that can help us tailor what we are offering to be sure that it's most relevant to the people that we support.
Yeah, thank you for rolling out those new resources. I mean, it's just that the times are changing, and to be able to kind of continue to be a leader that UC San Diego wants to be, I mean, we have to kind of try to stay ahead of these things. So, I mean, for me, when I'm engaged in these conversations, you know, I'm comforted in a lot of ways to know that HR is thinking about these issues, that they are working on these issues. And so hopefully the staff and other folks that are on this call as well today kind of have some of that same sense of, oh, folks are actually looking at these issues. It's not that these are things that aren't being addressed. They are. And hopefully kind of the regular cadence of information sharing that you're talking about will help kind of alleviate many of those concerns moving forward.
Yeah. Another thing I try to do is I try to see if we can get great ideas from peer institutions, either within the University of California or within the AAU. I'm part of, it's called the ARU, Human Resources Institute, but that is a group of the AAU, the Research One institutions. And we actually just had a virtual meeting, and I was a panelist speaking specifically about reimagining the workplace. So it's a topic of great interest across higher ed. And then I asked in a call with our UC sister institutions just last week, you know, has anyone come up with a great idea around supporting employees with issues of children and childcare and schools? And while we all the CHROs on the call recognize the importance of the issue, I can't say that anyone is ahead of us in coming up with a great idea. Maybe we will lead that group in coming up with a great idea, and others can emulate that. But I am also looking at, you know, how can we bring in best practices and learnings from our peer institutions? Because these issues are not just hitting us and impacting us here. They are universal issues, and they're extremely top of mind, I think, for leaders across higher ed.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you. So, you know, I'm looking at our time, and I see that our time is quickly upon us. And so I wanted to thank you again, Nancy. I wanted to thank the individuals who submitted their questions beforehand. There were a few questions that we weren't able to get to today, but we'll go ahead and save those and see if we can provide those to Nancy and her team so that she might be able to respond to some of those, or we can move them over to the appropriate executive level person to maybe respond to those. But right now, since it's all the time that we have today, again, I just wanted to thank everyone on the call today. I also wanted to just put a plug in for the next cabinet conversation. So that's going to be on August 11th. It's with our Associate Chancellor, Susie Sterner. So please keep an eye out for more information about that. Also, if you haven't already, save the date on your calendar for the staff summer celebration. It's a virtual event. It's going to span 3 days, August 18th through 20th. We're busy planning it right now. I've got my background on it to show it. If you have any questions, please reach out to Nancy. You can reach out to myself or others on the Staff Association. With that, I do want to thank you again for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next cabinet conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, everybody. Thank you, Bryce. Okay. Take care.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.